good evening. It's story time. This evening, I'm going to tell you the story of the Frenchman, the nuns, and the car. So I met this Frenchman at an inauguration with my French teacher, Delphine, and he was having dinner in the other table, and then her husband arrived, and we all sat together and spoke, and then we went out to a karaoke to sing. They discreetly left a little bit earlier, left us alone. He had a place up in La Sagárnaga, which is a touristic street, and I said, well, I have to go home because I had work the next day or something. But throughout that week, we met up one or a few times. He made these trips in between the weeks to certain towns to do his job. And then one day he asked me if I'd like to go on a trip with him. I think it was Apolobamba. I'm not sure the name of the, I'll have to look that up. Apolobamba. And I hesitated because this gentleman, his name is Francois, he smoked quite a bit. And I have nothing against smokers. I just never been able to keep a relationship with a gentleman who smokes because there's so much entailed with this before the meal, after the meal, in a social event, in the house. Should it be in the bedroom, not in the bedroom, after the activities, not before the activities. And I'm always happy when I see couples that they smoke together and I say they can share this. That's really nice. Well, I don't know if it's that nice for their lungs, but it's nice that they share this little habit together that us non-smokers, we don't have this. So I did hesitate, but he told me that he would pay for the gas for the car, and yeah. So I took my car to the mechanic and I said, look, I'm planning this trip. So he put it as best as possible. And I did have a problem with the motor that at a certain altitude it started heating, because according to my mechanic, he's like, my car was made to be driven at ocean level, at sea level, and we're almost 3,000 something, and going up to go to Apolobamba, we had to cross over the high plains, over the altiplano. So he's like, take it really slow, you'll be fine once you get on the other side, but crossing over this area, you don't want to overheat the car, so make sure you stop and pause, because it had already been broken once, and we sent the whole motor down to Santa Cruz, and they like fused it back together. We waited 3 months for this whole process. So my car had already had severe surgeries, but the Frenchman was charming in a uncommon way, so I accepted. We packed our things, and we left right off from the start. It was a little bit strange because he was upset about what I was wearing. And I thought since we were traveling as a couple and that he was French, I said, sure, I wear my coat. And then underneath, when I'm driving, I wore a beautiful red corset that I had. And I said, what's more beautiful than driving with a beautiful woman that has her corset on? That totally upset him, that we're not going to fit in. We have to look like the locals. And it was this whole thing. And I said, well, maybe that's your trip, but I'm in another trip in my head. Anyway, that was rocky start. Then, of course, he wanted to smoke every 15 minutes, felt like for me. And I said, well, you're going to have to open the window. And we're crossing 4,000 meters of altitude, so it's freezing outside. And he's with the window open, and he's like, well, I'd close it and you would be warm. But I said, why can't you just not smoke? But if you know a smoker, you know that's not an option. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this like, I think it's 3 days till you can arrive in Apolobamba. So you can imagine what that was like going down on that trip. And I really worked. I didn't even know the word yoga back then, but I really did some serious yoga work with the smell, with the attitude, with being with a person that apparently all of a sudden it was like he really didn't want me to be there. And then I thought maybe he's just using me for my car, which I think is highly probable. So we arrived first to another town, which was really hard to get to. And he got smashing drunk with the locals. And so I went to bed early, and that was it for me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I in for? I had already had the feeling when leaving. And yeah, I had to wait for him till he got up, till he got over his hangover. If we were going to continue, then we traveled another distance and we spent the night at another location where the host was an elderly gentleman who was very kind to me, and he offered me all kinds of accommodations, invited me to a sauna that was down there in the town, and so I had a lovelier time there. Not because I was with Francois. He didn't like my bathing suit either. He said why I couldn't wear a bathing suit like everyone else, and I said, well, this is the bikini that I wear always. And he didn't being a Frenchman, it was very strange how he did not approve of the clothing I had. And who cares? Anyway, we arrived at Apolobamba, and by then, I guess we were on the edge, or I was on the edge. And we had a dinner meeting, or a dinner evening, and he sat outside to smoke. Then he came in, he ate, then he went back outside to smoke, and he stayed out there. And the rest of the evening, I sat inside the restaurant, and I thought, what am I gonna do? I have to go share a room with this guy now? And you're not going to believe it if you heard my first story about the nuns, but the room he had rented was in the, yeah, where the nuns live. I don't know what that's called, a monastery or something. And these monastery nuns had their location or their house on the plantations of coffee beans. That was nice. Anyway, we arrived there. I met the nuns who were hosting the place, and then we went. I established in the room, and he pulls out this old, dirty mat and lays it on the ground and says, "You can sleep there." And I looked. You wouldn't know, not even my dog sleeps on that. So he's like, we can, like, he wanted to be like, we can make out together on the bed, but we do not sleep together. You have to sleep somewhere else. And we got into some serious discussion, and I couldn't handle the space anymore, so I went out. This was we had a big fight around midnight. And I was out at midnight in Apolobamba in the nun sanctuary, but it was like Spanish style, so there was spaces between. And the nuns were out and abound, and I was just standing there, and she looked at me and she's like, "Are you okay?" And then I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And then we went and we sat down. I told her everything that had happened to me from the trip. And she said, "I'm going to wait for you right here. Go back inside and get your things." And I did that. I went in. He was there. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to another room to sleep because I cannot sleep here." He had another whole fit because how this was going to look for him and the nuns and his status and whatever. I don't know. All these issues that he had. And I said, "Great. Well, but tonight I'm going to go sleep somewhere else, and we can talk about it if you want in the morning. We can sort it out tomorrow." I finally left, even though he was pulling the bags out of my hands, and they took me to a lovely, beautiful room. Much nicer bed than what he had. They told me I didn't have to pay anything. And it was funny. I spent the whole next day with the nuns. Actually, I spent the week with the nuns. And they said, we saw you when you arrived, and we didn't understand how Francois had ever charmed someone like you to come and be with him. Because they said, es el demonio. He's a demon, they told me. And I was like, ah! So I spent the days with them making crumble. I taught them how to make crumble out of tangerines and the crust with margarine because they don't have butter there. So that was interesting. They loved it. They loved it anyway. It didn't taste anything like a crumble, but it tastes anything melted in butter with sugar is a winner. So, and then I prepared myself for my trip home, and I said, I'm not gonna leave with him. And they're like, how? How are you gonna drive? That's, a 3-day trip on your own, alone. And what if something happens in your car and this and that? Plus, I didn't even know the way back because he had the map and he was directing the whole way. And I had no idea how I was gonna get from Apolobama in the jungle all the way back home to La Paz. Plus, we crossed the high plains. We detoured to 2 different towns. And I'm like, I don't know, but I can't leave the car here. And I am not going back with that man. And I said, I can't even let him know that I'm leaving because we're going to have another whole problem. I had to avoid him all those days. And I told him, yeah, I said, it's over. It's done. I don't know what happened. I don't know who you are, but I'm out of here. I'm leaving. And they gave me lots of food and bread and fruit and stuff, and I packed up early one morning. He caught me as I was rolling out the driveway, and yeah, he had like a little, he went into a begging stage, and then as he knew that it wasn't going to work and it wasn't going to turn, yeah, he turned into the demon himself. And the nuns had to come out, and they all just stood there. They didn't do anything towards him, but they all just stood there like, we're going to be witnesses if you don't let this woman leave. So I got in the car with all the nuns watching, rolled out, they closed the gate. He didn't follow me or anything, and I had driven 2 days before. I had gone to the gas station to fill up to prepare. So I just started, and I said, I'm going to take the first 3 hours straight out. If you've never driven in Bolivia, in the jungle roads, it's not the place to be a one person traveling. Not a one woman person traveling either. There's not paved roads. It's all dirt. It's basically in the jungle, all mud. But I had my planks of wood, I had my rocks, I had my shovel, I had my tools. I didn't have a pick at the time, which was a pity, but I had everything that I thought that I needed. The first 3 hours out, yeah, I put my corset on as well this time to drive out of the jungle in my corset. With all the dignity that I had left La Paz in. I had some funny ideas in my head at that time. In the middle of the jungle, it's like freaking hot and everything. I'm like, no, I gotta wear my corset now. I gotta prove myself. And I stopped to eat 3 hours out, and the car was doing great. And I think just because of the lightness of having left all that behind, the roads were dry, or there were places around the side that I could go, and I was astounded at how well I remembered the locations and where to go, having I didn't even tell you guys that part of the story. Some other time. There's like pockets in the stories of entire other stories of where I had been and gone. And I was reaching the cumbre, so almost to the peak, where the fog starts to come in from the mountain. And I was so desperate to get out of there, I forgot the warning of my mechanic that told me that I should stop and let the car cool off whenever I start hitting the altitude. So when I was probably still 3 hours from hitting the border of El Alto, which is the city at the top of La Paz, and the car died. Yeah. The car died, and I just sat there and sunk into my chair. I'm like, this is it. I'm in the middle of nowhere. It was almost 5 in the afternoon. Always at 5 are happening the things in my story, huh? Near the nighttime. I cannot make it happen in the morning so that it can resolve itself. It happens right at that time in the nighttime. So I got out, I looked at it, I had my little embudo, which is like that thing to put in. I opened it up, and I know that you can put the gasoline into the carburetor because it's not feeding anymore. I had all my little tricks set up, and the one man passed me by, and he said, "Is everything okay?" Oh, older gentleman with a flat car. And I said, "Yeah, I think I'm okay." I said, "Thank you." He said, let me stop to see if I can help you." So the man stopped, parked in front of me. And I think I knew more than the man, unfortunately, in this case. So he's like, "I'm sorry. I cannot do anything for you. I don't know how to work. I've never seen a motor like this." And I said, "I can't leave the car here." Because he was willing. He said, "I can take you if you want." And I said, "No, I don't even know where this is. I don't know how I can get back here." I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have anything back then. So he left. And I thought, okay, now I'm really ruined. And another car came up 10 minutes later. And I can't remember his name. This fair-skinned, young, indigenous man, also on his own. And he said, "Señorita, you okay having problems?" Everybody knew I had problems because the hood is up, and that's clear sign. That's the flag that's saying, "Help." And I said, "Look, I'm putting the gas in there, but by the time I get inside to turn it on, I feel like it's like gone through. I can't do both things." He's like, "Yeah, I do it. You go in, you turn it on." And I said, "Okay, great." So he was a little more help. We got it going. That was like, for me, it was the hand of God, this young man. And on top of it all, he said, "I understand that anywhere you stop or whatever, and if the gas pockets again, so there won't be gas going fluidly through, you will be unable to drive again. So I'm gonna go behind you until we hit the city limit." And I was like, okay. First it was freaky, then I was really glad he was there. He drove 3 hours behind me because I'm not a very fast driver, especially on roads that don't have any pavement or anything. Everybody's passing me by. I'm being very cautious. I don't want a flat tire. So all the way till the city limit, and then when we got to the toll where you pay, he just passed by and he was just like, "Okay, señorita, bye, have a nice..." It was already nighttime. It was almost like 9 or 10, and I was like, "Thank you." And luckily there, I just rolled all the way down to Los Pinos, I think at the time. I think I could stay some nights there, or I was moving towards the country at that time. So the interesting things that I learned from this story was that one comment that I learned afterwards was that you'll never let yourself be treated worse than you would treat yourself. And when I think about that story, it reminds me of how badly I allow others to treat me is actually how far I go to allow myself to be treated that way. Just close the door there. The thing about the nuns is the same thing. Yeah, I always land in the right place, and I have my pastor told me once, he said, there are 7 angels around you, Cinnamon, at all times. That's the kind of life that you're living. And I say, well, that's great. So I'm grateful about this sensation that I'm always contained. And another thing I learned was I cannot sacrifice any, like the habit, like the smoking part was a habit that was telling me something. And listen to what you're trying to override because you want something. I wanted something. I wanted some romance. I wanted something with the French guy. And even though it was all weird and deranged and the smoking and everything, I still went for it. I still went for that whole trip. And that was the only way to learn the lesson, was to go. And then it never even presented itself again, a situation like that, because I am already steered away from anything like that happening. And the message for me with the car and this man, after I had just been with this other man who would not even give up a cigarette and have me freeze there, that men are good. Men are genuinely good. This man drove behind me for 3 hours, putting himself in a complete uncomfortable situation. I'm sure he had where to get on his own time, and he could speed by me with his little car. And he took the time to just make sure that I got all the way back to the city. And it was a great experience. I brought back coffee, even though I wasn't a coffee drinker at that time. The nuns took me to the plantations while I was there, and there's even a coffee place that they have that they open, and they shared with me love. I met lovely people who work in the plantations, and yeah, it was a crazy adventure, and I saw parts of my country that I would probably have never seen, that just blew me away with their beauty. And I would love to take that trip again with maybe my daughter or someone on the spectrum that has a equal vibration with me. But that was the story of Frenchman. You will not believe it, but some months later, he had the nerve to call me. And I made the mistake of answering the phone, and I was like, I said some other guy's name, and he's like, no, it's Francois, but I see you've already moved on. And he hung up. And I was like, okay, I am not calling you back, sir. All right. So have a good evening. Hope you enjoyed the story. A few little lessons there. And see you next time in another story. Bye-bye.